The only thing that stays the same is that everything's changing all the time. Who's on the way up, who's on the way down, and who has their last chance today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome in, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day, where you can find us 5 days a week here on every platform available, starting on YouTube, going to the audio sites, everything where you can get a podcast. You can get us all the time. On Wednesdays, you get something special because Derrick joins us from Chiefs Digest. He is here today. We're going to have a good time. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com and RGRFootball.com. Together with my partner on the far side, Chris Clark at KC Chiefs Corner. You can find us there. You can find Matt at Chiefs Digest, but also Chiefs Digest here on the YouTube platform, as well as 41 is the mic and various stations, channels, and business around town. Make sure that you check them out. I think that you will be happy for it. This is the week where things get real. Initial looks have been dissected. Now things start to change. Who's going to be there? There's a couple of guys that are looking at last chances because come week 3 of the preseason, harder to get opportunities to really make an impression. What does that look like coming up later in the show? Couple roster moves. We're going to get to those as well as, is that a cause for some concern or is that basic roster churn? What does it look like for us? But we start with 2 days back into practice after preseason game 1. Who's moving up? Who's moving out? And I think that it really, from everything that I've been able to garner from the last 2 days, Matt, is that A, we're going to practice really light. We're not going to push ourselves into oblivion here too tough. And B, not a lot of shakeup from what I've been able to gather. What do you see out there and what concerns you?
Yeah, Tuesday was the last big day, if you will, for camp. I mean, it was another 225 practice. But I think you're also seeing senioritis kick in. That always happens during the last week of camp. And I'm not sure anybody wants to go back to St. Joe after the first preseason game. You got your kind of first taste of being out of town. You're ready to kind of go back home. I think this is just always Andy Reid's little, hey, let's go back and finish up some work and wrap up a few things. Practice was not very sharp on Tuesday, unless you were on the defense. The defense had a pretty good day on Tuesday. But it's the end. Wednesday's the last day, and honestly and surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of movement as far as depth chart goes and everything this week. Usually that first day after the first preseason game is what we call moving day, when you do start to see some of the rookies start to make some moves of the depth charts. And yeah, maybe if you saw a little bit of that, but there wasn't really a lot of significant changes. Really, if there's anything that I saw on the last couple of days that stands out to me, it's Nikko Remigio. I think we're certainly with that kick return may have solidified his spot on the roster, that he's going to be one of your return specialists, and as a result, he's got to be an offensive part of your team too. So there was a little bit more of working him in with the ones the last couple of days.
Kind of exciting when one of the things Ryan and I talked about when we came back after the preseason game was his catch on the sidelines, his ability to get his legs down and to complete the catch, showing that he is kind of learning and becoming somebody that the offense can kind of flow through at times if he's needed on the field. But it doesn't surprise me he's going to be the returner. If you looked at what happened in the game, there wasn't really anybody else that stood out at returner. And Dave Tobe even talked about it, saying, he wished that Rashard Smith would have taken the ball out as a punt returner, and that didn't really happen. So something to watch there if Smith is going to get another chance in game 2. But it sounds like Remigio may have that job secured.
Yeah, and whether that decision, by Rashard there to have the fair catch played into it, good question. Because again, Remigio's his big advantage is just that he's safe, that he's going to do everything right, and that's on the offensive side too. Is that he's a full effort guy. He's going to give you everything that he's got, but he's not the fastest, he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest guy on the field. But like I said, he just does everything right. And maybe a faster guy takes that kick all the way back instead of for 50 yards to midfield. But then again, maybe another guy doesn't follow the blocks and doesn't get out there in the first place. So, that's a trade-off that you're going to be making. And, and hey, there's still 2 games left. If there's a specialist that pops up and really explodes and shows that, hey, wait a minute, this is somebody who can add an explosive element, as long as there's not a lot of risk with that explosive element, maybe the Chiefs will still go a different direction. But as a result, as Remigio kind of maybe claims one of those spots, it puts another receiver in danger. And and that's the other thing, the last couple of days. I mean, if I were to, really project, and I'm working on a 53 player projection right now, I think Tyquan Thornton's going to be on it. Jason Brownlee probably will not be, and he's kind of increasingly looking like, despite that catch that he had the other night, might be the odd man out in the receiver room.
I have to agree with you, and I think that's probably right on the borderline where it ought to be. But can another game time performance change that? Is there anything on the offensive side, taking out the role on special teams, that can change any of it? That's going to be the question. As you said, not a ton of changes, but I do think there's some takeaways. A couple of welcome to the league moments for some of the rookie class. Both the guys on the offense, on the lines, both Josh Simmons, I think, played very well, but also got to the understanding that things are quicker in the NFL. You're an excellent athlete and you're a very good player, but you still got to improve your game as well. I think same for Omar Norman Lott. Both those guys in particular, I felt like did well for themselves, but showed that the adjustment to the NFL is not instant and it's not a given. They have to continue to work at that. What did you think for those two?
Yeah, and those 2 in particular, I think you're right. I mean, I think just kind of maybe solidified their spot and where the rotation is going to be. I don't think there's any of the rookies who are in danger of not making this roster right now from the draft pick standpoint. And Omar Norman Lott, right now, I mean, to me is the question. I still wonder if he's going to be a starter in week 1. I think there's plenty of time for him to end up claiming that job. And, he has put on some weight. How much weight differs depending on how much you've asked, whether it's maybe 10 to 20 pounds. But certainly, we talked about with him, being drafted, it was that, hey, maybe this is a guy that can eventually replace Chris Jones as a 3 tech. Right now, I mean, he's looking like he's going to be a 1 tech for this season. Now, certainly can play both roles, but they wanted him to bulk up and beef up this year a little bit to be a 1 tech, somebody who can play the run a little bit more. That may be just for experience purposes, because they may want. I mean, they certainly look like they're grooming Omar Norman Lott to be the next Chris Jones. And if that's the case, they want him to be able to do everything.
I mean, you can't blame them for that. There's a lot of traction there and a bit of a ways to go, but I'm not concerned about that. There are some things that are concerning, and we're seeing some roster churn in a couple of places, a couple of new adjustments. Which one hits home the most for me? It's the running back spot coming up next. August 26th is officially the FanDuel Futures Day. You want to get in on it. The brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions, the season-long predictions. So whether you're calling in your vote for MVP, it should be Mahomes, eyeing a long shot division winner, or you're ready to crown the next Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment, August 26th. So take a flyer. Put your money on MVP for Patrick Mahomes. Maybe get Offensive Player of the Year for Kels. He might be going all out. He's got things to celebrate, midnight releases, and all the things that go into it. It's not that far-fetched. So right now, visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets right now, because Futures Day is 1 day and 1 day only. That is the 26th. At FanDuel, play your game. This is always a little bit of a coin flip. And I know, Chris, you probably have the early take on what the transactions were that might interest you. I want to see if you and Matt agree. What stood out to you?
I just was kind of surprised that they went running back. Like, it made sense that they bring in, the defensive end, but surprising that they brought in a running back when you lose a safety. The numbers don't add up there, but you didn't see a ton from the running backs in the last preseason game. And the other thing that really stands out to me when you start thinking about how that's going to go, preseason game number 2 isn't going to be as big of a deal, and in running, I don't think is going to be as big of a deal. But preseason game number 3, you're going to have guys that aren't likely going to make this roster, and having an extra running back makes a lot of sense from that perspective, in my opinion.
Well, and you point out that you lose 2 players on injured reserve, and Janarius Robinson was one of them. You replace him with Nate Matlack, who's both defensive ends. That makes total sense. Then you lose a safety and you replace with a running back. That raises some questions. Yeah, and part of this is, I think, that certainly you look at the Chiefs roster construction, you look a little bit at the preseason game, but you look at the training camp as well. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt are making this team. I'm fairly confident that Brashard Smith is making this team. I don't think there's really any doubt there. You're going to have a 4th running back. So, hey, is Carson Steele going to be making that and this year, as opposed to when he made it as a running back to just happen to have some fullback skills? If he makes the team this year, it's as a fullback who can play a little running back. I'm just not sold that there's a spot that's carved out for him, and unless it's on special teams, and then that's why you're keeping Carson Steele around as just an all-around player that can give you a few things on offense. But has anyone else really stood out? And the question's about Elijah Mitchell, because you signed him to kind of be an explosive guy. If you're not seeing the explosion that you want there, and you feel like there's more upside with Brashard Smith as part of that upside explosion, then Elijah Mitchell may not have a spot on this team. And maybe you're trying to look at getting better than Elijah Mitchell, somebody that's got a little bit more juice. And, Michael Wiley, I mean, has something to prove. I mean, there's nothing that's guaranteed with him. I think he had 4.51 speed. That's not blazing, but can catch the ball in the backfield too. There's a lot of things that he can do. So I think you see at least that's what the Chiefs are looking for. I mean, they're looking for an upgrade, and I'm not certain that they're done. Whether it's the waiver wire or with a trade, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs were still looking at the running back field as an option. Even Michael Wiley's a guy that if you're happy with what you get, that at the very least, maybe is a solid practice squad candidate. But I think it does absolutely, to me, it puts into question, whether or not Elijah Mitchell and Carson Steele have spots on this team guaranteed.
Really quick, I just looked at this. His salary is guaranteed $1.1 million. If they don't get the deal done with Trey Smith, I think they have a little bit of a harder time cutting him and looking elsewhere. But since that deal got done, they have cap space. They have the ability to do something. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
There's a flip side to that coin as well. And the Janarius Robinson injury is unfortunate for him, a developmental player that I think that they probably invested in. It's curious to me, Matt, that was not a priority for them over running back to go get someone. So that tells me that the rotation that they have at defensive end is pretty much locked in. And they're comfortable with their top 5, which I can get behind. I don't see any reason that wouldn't be the case. Do you?
Yeah, and I think probably comfortable with their top 4 for sure. 5 is probably going to be Felix Anudike-Uzomah. And hey, with the camp that Felix has had, I mean, I think you would probably say that the trait that he has that makes him most likely to make the 53s, he's got a guaranteed contract. And, it's not expensive necessarily, but there would be a cost to walking away from Felix. And I'm not entirely certain that the Chiefs are ready to do that yet. Now you could avoid a little bit of that with a trade. And that's one thing that I thought was very interesting talking with Mike Bradway today. He was one of the coaches and executives that were on the podium today. But asked specifically about if once again the Chiefs, because they're 31 on the waiver wire. There's some GMs out there like Mike Borgonzi that's number 1 on the waiver list that are familiar with the Chiefs that might have some interest in some Chiefs players, knowing that they may not be able to sneak some guys through the waiver wire. Would there be interest in maybe moving some guys that they fear they would lose as waiver claims anyway, or trying to get guys that they know that they won't be able to get on waivers? And he noted they're already talking to their colleagues and other GMs around the league. Everybody in the front office is working and talking to everybody around the league right now about who they've got, who they might cut, who might be available, who they're interested in. So once again, I mean, the Chiefs aren't going to stand pat. So Their activity before waiver claims are over and even after waiver claims are over, it could be another busy few days around the 26th, give or take, where the Chiefs are, trying to firm up this roster or maybe even move some players for future draft picks or even player for player trades.
It's interesting because we talked about it in the first segment. Jason Brownlee could be the guy that's on the outside looking in, even if he has a good performance in this next preseason game. That's a guy who could maybe give you a low round draft pick if for the right team, if they don't think they can get him on the waiver wire, if he does something in camp. Kansas City, it seems, has always been in a position where they're not going to be able to get who they want. But Veach has always been a guy that could go out and make trades and figure out, okay, this is the guy I want. I'm going to trade. It was an offensive lineman that got him Shavarius Ward several years ago. It would not surprise me if they do something similar, whether it's offensive line or corner with Joshua Williams or, wide receiver with Brownlee. I could see them going in multiple different directions. And what you're saying, Matt, makes a ton of sense. Talking to Bradway, I saw the conversation on X earlier. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brownlee and Elijah Mitchell with his contract as well. You would include that there. Might not be a perfect fit in the Chiefs backfield right now. Maybe there's another team that has some backfield help. And another interesting player that I don't get any sense that the Chiefs are interested in moving, but when you're talking about like a Wanye Morris who might end up being your 9th or 10th offensive lineman, and you've got some other young guys that you're interested in and maybe keeping an offensive tackle. Hey, everybody needs offensive line help, and especially experienced tackles who have started games in the NFL. He could be a guy that has some significant interest for whether it's a player for player trade or a late round draft pick.
And good for them if they can move that and get value for value. If you are going to be in that position where you're buried on the depth chart, you don't expect contribution. It's exactly what the front office has to do. They've made investment in players on larks as well, players that they think need to develop. Some of those guys are coming up against what looks like diminished playing time after the second game of the preseason, trying to make that big play. There's wide receivers, there's corners, there's a number of players, particularly at one position. I want to know what's going to happen to linebacker. Matt's going to tell you as soon as we're back. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy, and it's the best time of the year because the NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. This year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Chiefs are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, so you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, you can get into it. My main league is over 20 years old, and it's been on Yahoo forever. Make sure you check this out because to celebrate their 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over the 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated from the league each week until there's only one left standing. And this season, it's just around the corner. Now's the time to get your league together and give it a try in a new mode, whether it's one of the classics, this guillotine, or head-to-head, or you can just join a normal public league like you have in the past. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. So opportunities abound in certain situations. You got Hollywood Brown, double throwing backwards on med balls today, not taking reps, not going to play in this next game is my assumption. So wide receiver, we've talked quite a bit about opportunities there, Matt. So across the rest of the roster, the one that I'm most interested in is the disparity that I see beyond the starting linebacker level and what that depth looks like. Let's just start there. Who's got to take the advantage this week in preseason game number 2?
Yeah, it's a really good question because the linebacker group, I mean, the Chiefs could keep anywhere from 4 to 6. I don't think it's going to be as little as 4. I could certainly see it being 6, though, because, and honestly, there's probably 9 guys on this team that I think can play linebacker at this level, just based on their experience at this point. I think the top 4 are fairly locked in, which you've got your starters if everyone's healthy, and Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, Leo Chenal, and then Jack Cochran. Then, hey, Jeff Boss is making this team. There's no doubt about that. So I think you're talking about 5 at the minimum. And then at number 6, you've got a lot of options. I mean, you've got Cam Jones, who's been around for a while. Cole Christensen, who's been more frequently a practice squad player, and you could certainly get, he's a veteran. So Cole, you can get onto the practice squad and be a guy that once again can give you a handful of games a year as a special teams player or a spots, backup if needed due to injuries. But Cooper McDonald has had a really good camp. Brandon George has been showing some moments at large, and especially going back to OTAs. I think at this point, I'd probably give the edge to Cooper McDonald, as who's had the most complete camp at this point. But any one of those guys could make this roster. I don't have any doubts about that. I'm not sure all of them could clear waivers, so you might lose some of them if you do have to place them on waivers. There are veterans, like I said about Cole Christensen, that hey, you can keep, because you can just release them and be able to bring them back. But that's a really competitive group, Ryan. And like I said, it's a group that the Chiefs have a lot of trust in, but they also trust their scouting staff and their coaching staff and Brendan Daly of being able to find talent and develop it too.
You say Cochran is the number 4 linebacker. I find that interesting. I would have figured that Boston was number 4. Cochran would be number 5. But you don't think that there's much of a chance that they'll only go with 4? You think that it's going to be at least 5?
It'll be at least 5. And Cochran, remember, has got a couple of things going for him. One, they're comfortable with him playing anywhere at this point. Okay. They're also comfortable with him being the mic right now, which, yes, Jeff Boss is playing the mic a little bit, but I don't think they'd be comfortable necessarily if they had to force him into backing up Nick Bolton right now. And with Drew Tranquil being banged up a little bit too, I think that also would certainly. But, Cochran's also one of these guys, relatively affordable, but he's also one of their best special teams players. So you factor all of that in, and the fact that he can play all 3 spots. And look at what happened in the preseason game the other night. Drew Tranquil's out. Who's starting in his place? It's Jack Cochran.
Yeah. I think that the interesting one that we've talked about ad nauseum, other than wide receiver, is going to be the DB room. And you start talking about the corners and even safeties, because you start talking about guys like Christian Roland Wallace and Chamari Connor playing both corner and safety to some extent. How many are you thinking really are in a position to make this roster in the DB room? Are you thinking it's going to be 8, 9, 10? And who are, I would think that you have kind of said Joshua Williams looks like he's maybe on the outside looking in. Are you still kind of feeling that way?
I mean, Josh Williams right now is the most bubble of bubble boys, because, hey, barring any injuries and certainly with Christian Fulton back, at the corner spot, you're going to have Trent McDuffie, Christian Fulton, Jalen Watson, Noel Williams, Najee Johnson, no matter what. Nazee's, I think, pretty solidly on this team for a lot of different reasons. There's 5 right there. And then you go over to safety, defensive back, however you want to call it. You can include Brian Cook, Chamari Connor, Jaden Hicks, Chris Roland Wallace, especially after the game he had the other night, is absolutely making this team. You've got 9 right there. So who's your 10th if you're keeping 10? Is it Mike Edwards? Is it Josh Williams? Glendon Miller is one of the young guys who's really made a strong case. Melvin Smith and Kevin Knowles are probably a little bit further back, but they've both been battling and kind of in that mix there. And there's no doubt. I mean, Josh Williams is firmly on the bubble. He could end up being that 10th guy if you go with kind of a 6 and 4 mix. And with Chris Roland Wallace being, I don't know how you want to describe him and Chamari Connor. I mean, Connor is, I feel like, firmly a safety, just plays a little nickel corner. Roland Wallace has changed positions completely. I mean, now he was last year a corner who played a little safety. Now, I mean, I think you're gonna have to call him a safety. I mean, he runs with the safeties all the time in practice, and once again, he's a guy that calls himself a defensive back. He doesn't. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can do a little bit of everything for them. But I thought it was really notable. I thought from the coaches that we heard from on Tuesday, Dave Merritt talked about that if you're playing multiple roles and you're making mistakes, that's understandable. You're doing a lot. if you got one job and you're making mistakes, that's a problem. And, he brought it up in conversation about Noel Williams, but finished it with saying, hey, but Noel Williams is coming on. He's improving day by day. He didn't mention Josh Williams in that conversation, but I couldn't help but think that he was talking about him a little bit too, because Josh Williams has one job. He's not moving back and forth between positions. He's a boundary corner. He's on the outside. It's all he does. And if he can't get off the third team, I just don't know how he fits in with this roster. So I could be wrong. He may absolutely make this team firmly, be the 10th, defensive back overall, and be fine. But it certainly feels like, hey, between him and Mike Edwards, I don't see how both those guys make this roster.
That's exactly where I'm thinking at that position too. And somebody's got that magic spot on the practice squad that has been previously owned by Deon Bush. So let's see what happens there. There's a couple of spots. I was surprised by how much Jared White played in the first preseason game. I want to see what he can do in the second preseason game. The rotation at defensive tackle in terms of depth and who makes that practice squad as a call-up type guy. Who, Matt, if you had to sing out one person right now that has the most to gain in preseason game number 2, who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, to gain, I think the opportunity that is there, because maybe they can claim whether it's a 10th defensive line spot, 5th defensive tackle, however you want to call it. I'm going to go with Marlon Tuipulotu. This is one of the minor kind of changes we saw on moving day this week, as far as guys who are getting maybe some reps higher up than they were on the depth chart before. Tuipulotu spent some time out there next to Chris Jones with the number 1 defense on some reps today, and that certainly was a little bit of they were in a run period, so that's part of it. But then again, you're at the point in camp where you're looking at the first team defense, first team offense, and if you see a guy that's out there spending time with them, they're seriously in the mix for the 53. So, and that's the distinction that, once again, I make between a Mike Edwards and a Josh Williams. Mike Edwards is spending time with the ones and a lot of time with the twos, and Josh Williams isn't. Marlon Tuipulotu is getting some opportunities right now. So I think he's got a chance this week. They're giving him an opportunity to try and claim a spot on the 53. And, we're talking about, these are the difficult decisions that this team is going to be making. I firmly believe that, it's the decision as far as how the roster goes in depth chart from position to position probably isn't that hard. I think you can probably say, hey, here's your top 7-8 defensive tackles. Here's your top 7-8 defensive ends. But the question is going to be, do you keep, 5 and 5? Do you keep, 6 and 4? Do you keep 5 and 3? I mean, there's going to be some questions there. Do you keep, 7 wide receivers or 4 tight ends or 4 or 5 running backs? I mean, it's not, to me, the ordering at each position isn't nearly as competitive and interesting as far as, just the how many players do you keep at each position. So I don't think in some spots that it's like necessarily Tyquan Thornton versus Jason Brownlee. It's going to be Jason Brownlee versus Robert Tonyan for, those roster spots.
And that's a fantastic point, and that's exactly where I was actually going to go with my next question to you. Is when you start looking at this, we've talked about it multiple times. Offensive line, probably 8 or set. You're looking at, are they going to keep 9? Are they going to keep 10? You talked earlier about, Owanye Morris. Is that somebody that they can maybe trade off because he's their 9th offensive lineman? If they do something like that, if Owanye Morris isn't on this roster, do you see a young tackle or another young lineman stepping in and being that 9th guy, or do you think they'll only go with 8?
I mean, right now it would look like Esapole is the young guy that's potentially the Ethan Driscoll.
That'll make Ryan happy.
Yeah, I mean, and on a lot of ways reminds me exactly of Ethan Driscoll in the fact, both got a lot of size, athleticism. There's an upside there. Ethan's been out since the appendectomy. Hadn't shown a lot before that, so I don't know if that was an issue before. You might basically be wiping out training camp for Ethan Driscoll this year and saying, hey, wait a minute, he just needs a fresh start, wiping out everything. He just hadn't at this point looked like an upgrade from the guy that we saw last year, whereas Esapole looks like a kind of player that you want to see more of at that spot. And There's another interesting conversation about then who could be a swing interior guy or a player who could go back and forth. Chiefs. Here's the weird and crazy thing, because I like him because he's a great story and he's been a great dude to talk to. Chu Godrick. This is the most compelling roster bid that he's made in his 3 years in Kansas City, being an international player. And both Andy Reid and Andy Heck have mentioned this week about how that he's kind of turning the corner a little bit, and they've given him reps with the second team the last couple of weeks at both tackle and guard. I don't know how seriously to take the roster bid, but at some point you see a guy run with the twos that much, and ahead of maybe running even with a Wanye Morris and running ahead of a CJ Hansen. At some point, you guys will just trust your eyes and say, well, then the snaps at this point tell you that he's making a compelling bid.
Well, and I saw exactly what Heck said. Heck said he compared him to Hunter Norzad, and Norzad's getting better like Chu Godrick. And I'm sitting there going, wow, that says a lot compared to where I thought he was. Sorry.
Well, if you walk with the twos and you talk with the twos and you play with the twos, you're a two. Welcome to the roster. We're going to see what happens. We'll have more for you, obviously, in the run-up to preseason game number 2. Know that it's a different time. But, Matt, thanks for all the insight and setting us on what you're seeing as we get ready to wrap up camp. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, Grace. Great talking to you as always.
You guys have a good day. We'll be back with you tomorrow to get ready. A few more details, and then we will have a preview show for you for preseason game number 2, for what you need to watch, what you need to know, what we're all going to find out. Thanks for being with us today. Make sure you like and sub and hit that bell. We'll be back with you tomorrow.